Hi, good evening and welcome. I'm Lynn Marsden Atlas, Director of the Arthur Ross Gallery. We've been very lucky to have Stewart fly in from London for this lecture this evening and to open his exhibition directly next door of the Dogon, Work, Women and Water. Please welcome Stewart Franklin.
First of all, I'd really like to thank Lynn and the team at the Arthur Ross Gallery for working so hard to put this exhibition on and to sort of draw attention to this very important water and gender issue in Mali that we're going to talk about today. So what I'm going to do now is give you a sort of brief introduction to the talk and then go through it piece by piece. I was tasked really with trying to bring some sort of visual interest to this area, to try and sort of describe the magic and the importance of water to these people, to the Dogon people. Now the Dogon moved to this area in the 14th century. It was originally inhabited, you'll see the geography in a bit later, by the Telen people. So I was sort of looking to show really how special and important water is. This is a scene by a well in one of the towns. And I spent a lot of time not just photographing by the wells, but recording the singing and the speaking and people coming to the well. And it's all women. Women basically work the wells. And this work begins at about 4 o'clock in the morning. So they come down to these wells here from the top of the Bandiagara escarpment. The well's probably somewhere around here, and then they have to walk all the way back up through this very steep escarpment. The escarpment's about 500 meters high, and it extends for about 150 kilometers, about 80 miles long. It's a big sandstone escarpment, and 5 times every day, women, as you can see, often carrying children, have to go down and collect their water. I also want to say, and you can see here what the edge of the escarpment looks like. I mean, there are loads of escarpments all over Africa. Many of you have probably heard of God's View in South Africa, or the Rift, Great Rift Escarpment in East Africa. And you know, these are created by different aged sedimentary rocks. Weathering at different stages and at different times. And so you're left with these cliff faces. You've got loads of them here in the States. Some not far from here. I think you've got one in the Catskills. Got the Niagara Escarpment. Yeah, I mean, they're everywhere. And the reason why these people, these Dogon people, started to live here is that there were these caves where they could set up their homes and build their houses. And one of the theories behind why they went there is as a retreat from the Islamicization of Mali. So they were people that wanted to continue with their largely animistic beliefs, and then they found this sort of defensible area, because obviously if they're hidden away in the caves, they're harder to attack. So these were people during a period of intense Islamicization who were trying to get away from it. We see similar landscapes, for example, in France, in La Cévennes, which is an area where Protestants tried to get away from the Catholicization of France. And the other thing, of course, I wanted to describe about this picture isn't just water that is women's work. It's collecting firewood on donkey carts. None of them have any cars. I never saw a car that any of them owned. They go out to collect firewood. Firewood's normally quite dry and brittle, but just small sort of pieces. But obviously, as they take more firewood, then it's easier for the desert to move in. So it's a difficult balance. And here we are, sort of washing clothes. This is another role that women have in these small sort of little ponds of water, or as you'll see in a couple of pictures. You know, very often water has to be, and I've seen this in 2 or 3 different parts of Africa, you know, literally they dig down with their hands to get to water as it starts to disappear into the water table and into the aquifers. So you get quite a sort of heavy rainy season where the Niger flood starts in about, well, the peak of it's November, but you know, at the back end of that, the waters keeps disappearing further and further down into the soil, and they literally have to go on their hands and knees. I mean, this is muddy, dirty, disgusting water that they drink just like that. There's no filtration. I mean, I have to say, Mali is an extraordinarily poor country. It's one of the poorest countries on earth. Half the population live below the poverty line, which is defined there as less than $1.25 a day. That's less than half the population. Infant mortality, let's see, I mean, infant mortality is worked out by how many infants die before they reach the age of 1. I think in Pennsylvania it's about 7.3. In Mali it's about 106 per 1,000. So that means, if you do the maths, it's about you're 15 times more likely to have your baby die in Mali than you are in Pennsylvania. So it's a really, really poor area where people are living on the edge of starvation and deprivation the whole time. I really don't want to understate this, because this is something that, you know, gets glossed over. It doesn't often get reported because people are kind of blasé about poverty quite often, which is a real shame. And you can see that a lot of the people that are doing the work are children. They're young girls, 10, 11, 12 years old, or some quite old. But these are all not getting water from the well, they're getting water from under the ground in these pictures. Then we move to these pictures where they're walking down to the well. This is the early morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, collecting water 5 times, 6 times they have to make this journey every morning and then come back. So this is what I was tasked to document, really, is the sort of the preciousness, the importance of water, and the struggle for water. You know, the water then comes into some of the small huts in the village, and you'll see more pictures, and then it's used obviously for everything, for cooking, drinking and washing. That's all they have. So this gives you a sort of an idea of the villages. These little huts with the peaked grass roofs are sort of granaries. They're where the agricultural produce is stored. Agricultural produce is mostly pearl millet, some sorghum, some vegetables, onions, but it's mostly pearl millet. So the water's brought up through these narrow sort of passageways and then stored. Strangely, the men and women have their own separate granary buildings, and the women do have quite a lot of control over, you know, keeping their money, the money that they make, and their jewelry and so on in these buildings, and the men aren't allowed to go into them. The important challenge for me photographing this was to try and show water as something really precious, you know, as something like something incredibly valuable. So I had to sort of try and get above the water as it sort of shone and came up the path. And here you are, you can see more clearly the structure of the villages. This is what sort of millet sticks look like over here. That's actually a door, but there are these long sort of sticks, and that's what the grain clings to. So they're there just going in to store the water. You can see some of the rudimentary cooking pots and pans down by their feet. And you can get a sense of how basic. I mean, there's obviously no electricity. Well, why did I say obviously? You probably expected there was. There's no electricity at all. It's a very, very rudimentary lifestyle. And this is another similar picture coming up through the village. One of the strange things that I read about the Dogon community is that they have one building for sort of communal meetings, and they purposely keep the roof really low so no one can stand up and shout. This is quite an interesting political politico-architectural decision. If no one can stand up and sort of forcefully shout, then things can be resolved more quietly. Anyway, that's sort of an aside. So what I said earlier in the talk was that the original inhabitants of this area were an ethnic group called the Telem, and they lived in these caves. They were apparently quite short. In some source they use the word pygmies, but I'm not sure what that really means. But they lived in these caves, and then when the Dogon moved across and occupied that area, they occupied the cave settlements that they'd originally inhabited. So that's what, this is a village called Tela, and that's what they do. The other thing the Dogon are well known for is wood carving. They make beautiful wood carvings, and they're very, once every, I don't remember how many years, maybe 70 years or something, they have this extraordinary mask dance. And anybody tell me what this is? Yeah, who was that? You were quick. Oh, you've been there, right. Yeah, so this is a ladder, and you know, it just shows you the sort of basic rudimentary. There aren't these shops in the way that we know of shops in the whole of this escarpment area, and there are just places where you can get basic supplies, and this will take you up to the roof where you can get stuff that's stored on the roof. But it's, for me, as a photographer going there, it was just incredibly sort of beautiful to see. I mean, when you go to the shop and you buy something, it's always square and straight, and then there were these sort of curves and everything. This was in one of the villages. I went there with a Norwegian foundation, Voss. So they wanted to this lady to wear this sort of teardrop jewelry. But it was a kind of, I really liked the pictures, just extraordinary, interesting face, and I loved the way I was trying to get the eyes to sort of relate to the windows, the carved windows behind her eyes. So that's how that one came about. This is at the foot of the escarpment, and this is really daily life, a woman walking back from the well with her child. You can see at the background some of these trees are called baobabs that are, they get pretty big in some parts of Africa, in Madagascar, Botswana, see some of the biggest ones. They're very beautiful trees, and they're a source of food as well. The fruit of the baobab is a sort of a sherbety flavour, and actually bees tend to nest in them, baobabs, and you get honey from them too. But that's mainly further to the east. So here more just to show a bit more of the daily life around the well. So the aim of the project that the Voss Foundation were trying to do was to try to increase the number of wells, to also to make sure that the water was clean, because as I said earlier on, infant mortality in Mali is very high, 106 per 1,000. And one of the main killers is bad water, sewage or unregulated, unmanaged sewage, and not clean water. That's really one of the biggest killers. Another one, obviously, malaria. But bad water is a really serious killer in Africa. This is the area, just in a slightly different part of the Dogon area, washing clothes in the river. It's a very social moment. As well for the women who go down there to wash clothes. But it's also work, it's hard work, and it's in the boiling hot sun. I mean, the daytime heat in Mali's, I don't know how you do this in Fahrenheit, but it's about sort of 40, 41, 44 degrees Fahrenheit. So they're not just working, they're working in extraordinary heat, which is also very dehydrating for the children who are with them, the babies who are with them as well. So there's always this danger of dehydration, of lack of water, or, as I just said, of water that isn't clean, water that isn't good. These are people really living on the margins. But also, you know, this is a group of people that you can see in the top right, they're building bricks. They're making bricks out of some of the mud. This is quite near Mopti, which is where the Niger River comes through that area. And, you know, this is an occasional flooded pond, and it's a kid. He's got some sheep and goats with him, and he's going for a swim. So it's also a joyful thing when it's there, water, and a terrifying thing when it isn't. And this picture sort of illustrates that this is very, very close to the escarpment where you saw the picture of the lady with the donkey and the firewood. And this is relatively new desertification. These are dunes blowing south into the area, into the base of the escarpment. And you know, this would make it extremely difficult for them to grow anything if the whole, you know, if the wind systems changed, the dunes blew in, it would be extremely difficult to grow any vegetables or even millet at all. We saw a few baobabs. Here's a rather special one. They are majestic trees. They're also used by hunter-gatherer groups in some parts of Africa to get a view, to see the landscape, to see where the animals are. They climb up into the tree, and also for shelter. Quite a lot of them have a gap. You can go into the root and stay out. So that's what I wanted to show you about some of the work I did in really what was quite a short trip to the Dogon. So, you know, I can't say it in any way at all that I'm an expert, or I come nowhere near it. I'm somebody that went there for a few days and took some pictures. But I hope what I did was try to throw a little bit of light on the challenges that the people who live there face in that time.
How has this series in particular been received? Because it's shockingly different, obviously.
Yeah.
In so many ways. And it feels like slightly more personal work in a way?
It's totally personal, yeah. It's very personal work. I'm literally right there. I mean, I live in this landscape. I don't know how it's going to proceed, and that is the cool thing. I know that I have an exhibition in 2012, which I have to put, you know, about 45 prints on the wall for. I have no idea what those prints will look like. But I do know that there was a painter, Cézanne, you know, where he used to say that, you know, if you want to draw something, draw your stovepipe. You know, he sort of had this idea that it didn't really matter what you drew, as long as you drew, as long as you had the sensitivity to understand form and the way various things in a room related to other things. It didn't really matter. And I'm beginning to get to that feeling that you can kind of somehow universalize the particular, the very particular, in an interesting way. And I haven't got there yet. I'm struggling with it. It's quite a difficult project, but I'm enjoying it a lot. And I never know what I'll find. I quite often sort of teach workshops and so on. And one of the things I say to students is, if you walk for a mile from your house, you'll always find a picture. You just have to get out of the damn door. And a lot of people spend a lot of time wondering what they're going to do. But if you just go for a walk, you'll find something. I think there's an exhibition opening at some point.